Based on the activity, Joe, that went on that flight, I mean, that was just not normal behavior from anyone. And what I do know, you know, a lot of people have asked me that question, a lot of people in the media, and I would suggest they just check our statements against the flight attendant statements, because apparently they match up, you know, real succinctly.
Kevin, tell me about the flight attendants and also about the other passengers. Did you get a sense when you were up in there, and when did you first get the sense maybe that the other passengers and the flight attendants were very concerned about what was going on Northwest Flight 327 that day?
Well, there was one other gentleman that I noticed stood up against the wall facing the laboratory, and he and I would have eye contact whenever I saw things go on, and I was trying to, by looking at him, trying to get a connection with him. Are you seeing what's going on? Are you feeling as terrified as I am about this? And the thing hit the peak for me when Annie suggested to go up and talk to the flight attendant, because I don't know what to do. You go and talk to them, that's what they're there for. And when I went up and spoke to the flight attendant up in first class and said to her that I don't want to, I hope I'm not coming off wrong here, but I am so uncomfortable of what's going on this flight. These men are making me so afraid. And I was shaking, and I asked her for a glass of water, and my hand was shaking as I was telling her how afraid I was. And she said to me, "You're right on schedule. We are aware of it. You're not overreacting. The captain's aware of it. We're passing notes to each other. There are people on board higher up than you and me that are watching these men." And that did make me feel a little more grounded, because I didn't feel like I was alone about the situation watching it.
And Kevin, as you all were starting to land in Los Angeles, and at this point we've heard you and Annie both say that 6 or 7 of the gentlemen then got out of their seats after the seatbelt signs were on, everybody else was seated, and they got up again seemingly in unison. Now, I know when I fly, and I fly, my gosh, I fly all the time. If I were to get up when a plane was landing to get a cell phone that was ringing above me or something, I would have 2 or 3 flight attendants come to me and say, "Sit down, sir." In fact, they do it all the time. Did any flight attendant tell any of these gentlemen that they needed to sit down as this plane was descending after a flight that apparently was harrowing even for the flight attendants?
No, they didn't. And now, from digesting this more and telling more people about it, I understand. They were afraid. And immediately when they landed, I had so much adrenaline going on, and the air marshal who spoke to us said that you need to, you know, drink a lot of water afterwards and relax, because you will crash after having all this adrenaline through you. They were afraid, and now I understand why they didn't say anything. They were doing the best they could, and I'm just glad I don't have a job like that, because I could not go back to a job like that.
Now, Annie, Kevin said that he was nervous on this flight, had to go up, get water throughout the flight, but you actually have said that you were nervous before the Flight 327 even took off from Detroit. Tell us why.
You know, I don't believe that I was nervous about the other passengers per se. I was really struck by the fact that Kevin and I and our son ate in a diner with metal forks and knives right next to the gateway, and there was no secondary screening procedure for any of us. So, and we had been traveling through Europe and India and whatnot just a couple weeks before, and the security there was really tight, and whenever we took a connecting flight anywhere, we were absolutely screened and asked a whole bunch of questions. In Detroit, there was none of that. I mean, we just simply got on the plane.
Annie, stay with me. Kevin, stick around, because after the break, we're going to have more with both of you. Also, we're going to be talking to NBC's Pete Williams about the FBI's take on this story. We'll be right back. We're back with Annie and Kevin Jacobsen. Kevin, let's go back to you. You know, it was so compelling hearing you talk about this journal that you were writing about. You really believed, as this flight was coming into Los Angeles, that you and the other members on that plane were going to be killed?
Well, I don't know if I believe exactly that, but was I terrified? And yes. And was I ready to do something when something happened, yes. Anything else is speculation. But I have never been so terrified in my whole life as I was on that flight. And I'm a husband and I'm a father, and I'm there with my wife and my 4.5-year-old son, who doesn't know anything about this. And I was ill. And it actually, watching the different things that we've done on this, actually brings back the emotions and the memory of it. And I'm speechless at sometimes about this.
Yeah. You know, again, for those just joining us, again, 14 Syrians were on a flight from Detroit to Los Angeles. Some passengers were startled by their behavior. So was it just a case of post 9/11 jitters, or was there a genuine cause for concern? And Annie, you know, again, I know people are out there that have read your story. They're listening to it tonight. They're saying, gee, what, Arab men can't go to the bathroom? Explain to me specifically how these Arab men going to the restroom on this flight, 4-hour flight, 4.5-hour flight, why it upset you so much and why you think there may have been suspicious activity going on.
Joe, on the flight, I mean, it just was what it was. It was terrifying. Maybe it's one of those situations where you had to be there. I mean, you know, I wrote this article, and we've just had a ton of reader reaction from it. And some people are saying, oh, they're overreacting. But really what interests me most is this overwhelming response that I have gotten directly from pilots of commercial aircraft. And these guys are saying, Annie, this is not an isolated incident. Annie, I get every detail that you were talking about because I've seen it. And I've got pilots that are willing to talk on the record for the first time about what they're calling the airline's dirty little secret. And what this is dry runs being conducted. And that's a horrifying dirty little secret.
All right, Annie Jacobsen and Kevin Jacobsen, thank you so much for being with us tonight on Scarborough Country. We greatly appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now let's bring in Pete Williams. He's NBC's justice correspondent, and he talked to the FBI, and he joins us now. Pete, thanks for being with us. Now, you've just heard the Jacobsen story. You've also read it previously. I understand you've talked to the FBI in both Washington and Los Angeles. What did you find out about Northwest Flight 327?
Well, the investigators who responded confirm in the rough detail what the Jacobsens report. In fact, there were 14 Syrian men on the plane. The airline did radio ahead and say there was some potentially suspicious behavior. All the men were detained at the airport. They were questioned at length by federal authorities, who were satisfied that the men had nothing sinister planned. They were musicians going to a gig on the West Coast. They said there were no incidents in the airport. The men were all very cooperative, and after extensive questioning, they were released. So there was enough concern that the federal agents were called in, and they did interrogate them.